Up to general discussion if there are any questions you want to ask any one of the speakers or all of them. Oh, no.
I have two completely, I don't know, completely unrelated, but unrelated points. So one would be to Richard's talk about the intertext and relations among documents. And I think the challenge is really that it's also something I'm struggling with in my work to understand what are different types of relations between documents and how do they then relate to what you say the translation of or the travel of ideas. So because, for example, one relation between documents could be that they contain similar words or similar statements which would already go in the second part of how do ideas maybe travel or at least copy between documents. And then there are other types of relations like the format looks the same, but whatever is inside, or one document quotes the other one, but what does that mean? So that's just a basic challenge. I just wanted to throw that into the room. And the other thing was that it's certainly, I think with all three of you presenters, and I'm totally seeing this in my own work, that sometimes we as researchers find certain documents that we find interesting, maybe not only because of their content, but because of the way we access them. Something like we had to go to this, like in your talk, like we had to really physically go to this one, archive, and we found this one, and we were looking for it the whole time. I mean, in my case, I was looking for certain documents a long time, and then they were not available, and then at some point I found them somewhere, and what does that do? I'm asking this to myself, is this creating a bias, how we analyze these documents later? If we are so proud that we have them, maybe we give them more attention that they deserve, something like that. That's also general.
Okay. Does anybody want to come first? Yeah.
I think absolutely right. But I think it probably applies to all research. I've done other kinds of research before, and I've had interviews where I thought, that was just such a wonderful interview, and you can't help but let it influence your analysis, and I think that's just part of what research is actually. But yeah, to be aware of it.
I think when there are very few documents, that may happen, that it's so difficult to access them, that then you try to mystify them a bit too much. But also there is a bit of fluidity with events. And for example, my topic is an example of something, there were an archives when I started, and now there are massive archives. And because it was a massive project, the archive is massive, and there is now a real problem on how to navigate that. In fact, there is a special issue coming out in a History of Science journal dealing precisely about that. So when there is a superabundance of information rather than a scarcity, then you have to be very careful about that. And I think it is very important to have a real sense of what you want to tell, and just select, not think, you shouldn't think that the story is going to be in the archives, that by reading the archives you are going to have the story. You have to analyze the archives in some way to tell a story. And in fact, those tools that enable you to analyze the archives make the sampling for you, so to speak. So you end up with a bunch of records that you can analyze that way, and in sharing the document itself with what you get from the analysis, you create the narrative. But it is a narrative, and you told that, Chloe, it's a story, not the story. It's your story, because there is no such thing as a story. That's what I've learned as a historian.
Any other questions? Oh yeah.
Can I ask a question of both Richard and Nicola? I was very struck by what Richard said about a document being something created between two people, and it's something that I very much saw in my civil service files, where this is not my research question, so I'm not paying much attention to it. But what are in these files is the drafting of a policy document, and so what I find irritatingly, they often don't have the final version. but what you have is a draft, and then somebody's written all over the draft, and then there's a memo from somebody saying, oh no, we can't say that, or we've got to say this, or we better put that in. And so in these files, I've got like almost the history of how a policy document has been created. Now, that's not my research question, so I'm not particularly looking at that. But I think for people who are interested in policy making, those kinds of sources could be really valuable because they are about interactions. And it connects with your stuff, Nicola, too, because that's what you see. But what worries me is that may be disappearing in the modern digital world, because all that stuff nowadays will be in emails, and I don't know if they're being. I mean, I know there are a whole lot of projects to preserve digital information, but I don't know if they're there in the same way that the stuff in the 1940s was very clear. And also because they're saving paper, it's a time of austerity. You've got a whole lot of stuff all on one piece of paper, different bits from different people, it's all there in one piece of paper. And I wonder, I don't know if anybody knows, is that all disappearing? If you wanted to look at modern policy.
It's in the world of businesses, which is where I come from.
Yeah.
That process isn't archived the same. It will be on a PC, which will become obsolete in 5 years.
Yeah.
And that file will get saved for X amount of time while it serves its purpose. But once you have the final copy, that's what will get archived, not the process. So, I mean, that's very much how I've worked with producing policy documents. I don't think it is being archived. And certainly not in the private sector, working for the public sector.
Does that mean that the documents are going to be sanitised? Because you'll see the end result, but you won't see the process that will go to the end result.
Possibly.
That would be the effect.
The end product will probably be the same as what you historically saw, but you won't pick up on the subtleties of change as much.
And less notes in the margin, I think, as well. You know, the things for transparency and accountability. Because if say things in email that they might have jotted down before.
There's also a problem about the original digital, it's not that much easier to apply.
Could you speak up a little? I'm sorry.
There's also a problem about original documents. I mean, I know there are processes in digital to make it something original, but if there are, I assume that easier. Just change the date. When you, for example, when you save document, you're writing on something. It's your first draft, and you just instead of making a new file, just save on it. Somebody's go there and say, oh, I made it in March, and it was all in January. But you never know because the PC, the file saved.
Yeah, I think that depends on your
Yeah,
organizational processes. You
but
normally save the next version up to
yeah,
the
I mean,
previously.
but
Yeah, but it could.
from an historical perspective, you want to trace the
Hmm.
whole process of doing it.
I was just going to say that might be true about the formal archive, but I've been really fortunate to be quite trusted by my civil servants that I'm interviewing, and ex-civil servants in particular. So I've ended up with a whole lot of emails and stuff which their status, I'm not sure to what extent I should even be looking at them, let alone using them. But I think to some extent there will hopefully still be an informal archive, a personal archive that these guys just happen to keep. And I was really lucky to be able to tap into. And that comes with a perception of being quite a trustworthy researcher, someone who's constructive rather than critical. That's how they see me. So maybe that has implications as well for my research.
Yeah, I was just say, I'm not really here to try and learn how you guys are trying to work with documents. But one of the things that might be interesting for you to know is that the developments in industry. So one of the applications of technology is deep learning. It's basically where you give a computer a whole bunch of stuff and it works out for itself what it is and how to describe it. So one of the things that we're working on is data mining. So you just basically take a whole bunch of stuff and pour it in. So it could be an entire email archive from a government department and another whole document archive, and you just pour it all in and it figures out what's connected to what, so that then you can link it together. So even though the links might not be there in the way that they're all written on
No, and I guess it's also because with emails, the decision should be taken now. Because, well, I guess all of us experience that you, every day, you receive like tens and tens and tens of emails, and you systematically delete a bunch of them. So even if the decision of archiving the emails is taken yearly, I mean, lots of it is going to be lost, and there is a difference between what you consider valuable now and what is valuable for history, because, well, people drafting a policy document, what they want is the final result, and they aren't that much concerned with the previous drafts. Whereas, yeah, the valuable thing for the historian is going through the different drafts, because basically you make very important historiographical points by browsing the different drafts, and you kind of challenge those narratives that we went from here to there unproblematically. Because this thing of going through drafts and how people then refer to the same process links to what Jonathan was saying before, memory and documents. I mean, how people remember things, and if you go through the paper trail, how things look like, and there is a huge gap. So in order to be able to triangulate between those interviews and those documents, yeah, we really need a rich document repository.
Can I make a comment on this? I wonder how much this is a problem for contemporary history and how much it is not a problem for history, which looks at the past, which is more remote. History has always dealt with the problem of lack of evidence, and your presentation, Miguel, is about the fact that evidence is not the trial for saying or for judging whether history is good or bad. So history is made of lack of documents. Interesting histories are made on the lack rather than on the presence of evidence. And in fact, historians, what they do is archaeology. I mean, they take what they find and then they make a history. So I wonder how much we are overemphasizing this this problem of losing important data because now we no longer write on a piece of paper.
Can I follow up? And also on the other hand, we have probably more capacity than ever to save data, and data is probably saved more than ever before. And there are also archives which are not official, like NSA in the US, right? I mean, I don't know what they have. Maybe they have all these emails that I've deleted already. So, but the question is, how do I access that? So I think maybe in the future we have all sorts of new, interesting archives coming up from the past.
And we're constructing that archive as we produce our research. We are also constructing that archive, right? Because we're doing some underlayering for future historians who are then going to contextualize the same documents. So if we're looking at drafts of a policy document, you know, we've saved that draft for future historians to look at as well.
Yeah. Just looking into that as well is the thing that we've not mentioned here is this figure of the archivist. I mean, it's particularly historical part. Archives have always been edited, they've always been, somebody's made a decision what is true.
Yeah.
It's not a new problem, it's just,
Yeah. Right.